The clash between Gohan and Cell in Dragon Ball Z is often regarded as one of the most iconic moments in anime history. It represents the culmination of the Cell saga and Gohan's long-awaited coming-of-age moment, but while the fight is legendary in terms of emotional impact and character development, it falls short when judged purely by the standards of what constitutes a good fight. That is, a battle characterized by tension, dynamic back-and-forth exchanges, clever strategy, and compelling choreography. In truth, once Gohan transforms into Super Saiyan 2, the battle becomes painfully one-sided for a while, emotionally stagnant and ultimately less engaging than what it could have been. These are purely my opinions on what I've experienced, so if you agree or disagree, I'd love to know what you think. Tension is the lifeblood of a compelling fight. Before Gohan's transformation, the Z fighters are overwhelmed and Cell appears unbeatable. There's a palpable sense of fear and desperation. However, the moment Gohan ascends to Super Saiyan 2, all of that tension evaporates. He immediately dominates Cell with minimal effort. What follows is not a fight, but a massacre. While it's narratively satisfying to see the hero triumph, the sudden power imbalance eliminates any sense of risk. A great fight leaves viewers on the edge of their seats, wondering who will prevail. Gohan vs Cell, by contrast, turns into a foregone conclusion. We know Gohan is going to win, it's just a matter of when. The dramatic momentum flatlines. One of the hallmarks of Dragon Ball's best fights, such as Goku vs Vegeta in the Saiyan saga or Goku vs Frieza, is the dynamic back and forth exchanges. Fighters adapt, counter each other's techniques, and push each other to their limits. In the Gohan vs Cell showdown, this is almost completely absent post-transformation. Cell is reduced to a punching bag, unable to mount a meaningful counterattack. Even when he attempts to self-destruct later and returns a super perfect Cell, the only moment of real tension is Gohan's delayed reaction in firing the Kamehameha due to his injured arm. But again, it's less of a tactical exchange and more of a drawn-out finishing move sequence. Cell gets no time to shine, no clever strategies, and no second wind worthy of his prior cunning. They were just stretching out Cell's lifespan for a little more. Cell is arguably one of the most intellectually threatening villains in Dragon Ball Z. He is calm, calculated, and resourceful, traits that are completely wasted in his final confrontation. Rather than pushing Gohan to the edge with psychological manipulation or tactical prowess, Cell essentially falls apart after Gohan transforms. The narrative leads into the idea that Gohan is too powerful, but in doing so it abandons the opportunity to test Gohan in ways beyond raw strength. Imagine a version of the fight where Cell adapts to Gohan's new strength, forcing him to be more than just angry and powerful, where Gohan must think and struggle to win, not just rely on overwhelming force. Instead, we get a lopsided clash that undercuts both Cell's menace and Gohan's potential for growth beyond brute force. While the emotional weight of Gohan finally snapping and achieving Super Saiyan 2 is unforgettable, the emotional tone of the fight becomes monotonous after the transformation. Gohan is angry, Cell is panicking, and that's pretty much it. There's little variation or evolution in the emotional stakes once the tables turn. Unlike the layered emotions in Goku's earlier battles, rage, determination, fear, strategy, the final beam struggle between Gohan and Cell is iconic though, bolstered by visuals, music, and Goku's spirit intervention, but when stripped of its aesthetic presentation, it's not especially clever or inventive. Compared to other battles that rely on choreography, creative abilities, like the fusion fights in the Buu saga, the finale here leads hard on the idea of who has the bigger blast. That can be exciting, but it's not enough to carry an entire fight, especially one meant to be the dramatic climax of a saga. As a narrative turning point, it works brilliantly. Gohan's transformation is legendary, and the symbolism of a new generation surpassing the old is impactful, at least for a while. But as a fight judged on choreography, suspense, and combat dynamics, it falls short of the standard set by earlier battles in Dragon Ball Z. It's more of an execution than a duel, and in that sense, it misses the opportunity to be as memorable for its fighting as it is for its storytelling. Now let's look at the Super Saiyan 1 Gohan vs Cell fight, because that also ultimately falls short of being a satisfying or compelling fight on its own. Measured by the usual metrics of Dragon Ball battles, engagement, battle, emotional payoff, choreography, Super Saiyan 1 Gohan vs Cell is a lopsided, meandering, and ultimately unmemorable prelude rather than a strong standalone encounter. Their first encounter lacks a distinct identity. It doesn't offer anything new in terms of choreography, tactics, or pacing compared to the fights that came before it. Goku's battle with Cell is much more dynamic, filled with speed, clever techniques, and mutual respect between the fighters. In contrast, Gohan's Super Saiyan 1 efforts feel sluggish and repetitive. He throws punches and kicks that seem hesitant, almost half-hearted. Cell easily deflects or counters nearly every attack, and there's no real pushback from Gohan. Instead of growing into the fight, Gohan just takes a beating, making the sequence feel like filler, stalling for time until the real transformation happens. Yes, it's a great payoff and a great scene, nobody can take that away from Dragon Ball Z, but when you look at the fights, a Super Saiyan 1 and Super Saiyan 2, what are they on their own? A core theme of Super Saiyan 1 Gohan vs Cell's fight is Gohan's reluctance to fight seriously. He doesn't want to unleash his full power because he's afraid of hurting others. He doesn't want to fight. While this adds psychological depth, it severely undermines the engagement of the fight itself. Rather than two warriors pushing each other to the edge, we watch one character Cell dominate while the other Gohan holds back due to emotional uncertainty. This reluctance may be thematically interesting, but it's not conducive to a good action sequence. The fight loses its back and forth rhythm because Gohan refuses to escalate. He's on the defensive, reactive instead of proactive. Even when Cell taunts him, mocks him, brutalizes others, Gohan barely fights back. This makes for good tension on a narrative level, but the physical combat as a Dragon Ball Z fight is stagnant and one-sided. To provoke Gohan, Cell creates the Cell Juniors and sends them in after the Z Fighters. This part of the sequence is meant to raise the emotional stakes, showing Gohan the consequences of inaction. But instead of enhancing the fight, it dilutes it. The focus shifts away from Gohan entirely for a chunk of time, turning into a brawl between everybody else except for Gohan vs Cell, the match currently on at this time. While the diversion builds tension and the Cell Junior fight is pretty cool, it doesn't add much variety to the actual combat with Gohan. When Gohan does re-enter the fray after watching his friends suffer, he still truly doesn't fight back. One kick and that's it, all up until Android 16 is destroyed. That's a lot of time spent watching Gohan not fight, and given the oh no face, in a fight that is supposed to showcase his progression. He's trained hard for a year, he wants to stop the android threat, but when he gets into the ring, he doesn't want to fight. That is a WTF moment because, in the past, stopping any evil would always outweigh his distaste for fighting. That's who Gohan was right up until the Cell games. Then he just stopped. During this moment, Cell is reduced to a cartoonishly cruel antagonist, constantly goading Gohan while holding back on his own full power. At first this serves as effective villain work, but over time, it becomes repetitive. Cell keeps saying the same things, I know you're hiding something, let it out, and then continues to toy with Gohan. There's no escalation or adaptation on Cell's part, which robs the fight of combat tension. He's not even trying to finish Gohan off. He's just waiting around for Gohan to break. That might work as psychological warfare, but it kills the fight's pacing and engagement. Ultimately, the fight only exists to lead into a real climax, Gohan's Super Saiyan 2 transformation. Every beat in the Super Saiyan 1 phase of the battle is structured to delay that moment. In that sense, the fight is more of a narrative bridge than a self-contained battle. It's not meant to thrill or challenge Gohan, it's meant to frustrate him, but in doing so it can frustrate viewers as well because Mastered Super Saiyan is not even a bad level of power for Gohan, it was pretty damn strong. And we don't really get to see his training in the hyperbolic time chamber in terms of being a warrior. Once he achieves Super Saiyan 2, he's just a monstrous powerhouse. With Super Saiyan 1 Gohan, we are left watching a character who is capable but unwilling to act, facing an opponent who is goading rather than attacking, while supporting characters are systematically taken down just to provoke a transformation. That's not a fight, that's a slow burn to a moment, and while the transformation does deliver, the journey to get there feels more like padding than progression. So the Super Saiyan 1 Gohan vs Cell fight fails to meet the standard set by other Dragon Ball Z battles. Gohan is passive, Cell is repetitive, and the pacing drags. It's a prelude, a narrative device, a long and drawn out setup. And in the realm of Dragon Ball where battles are often the narrative's emotional engine, this one stalls before it ever gets going. Despite being chosen by Goku to take Cell on, Gohan spends most of the battle refusing to engage with the intensity the situation demands. While this hesitancy is rooted in a moral stance, his distaste for violence and fear of losing control, it undercuts the gravity of what's actually at stake. The world is on the brink of annihilation, and Gohan, the strongest fighter available, refuses to act decisively until pushed to an extreme. Right when the ball is finally in his court, his reluctance allows Cell to terrorize the Z Fighters. That was because of Gohan. Android 16's death was because of Gohan. Goku's death was because of Gohan. All events could have been avoided had Gohan taken the fight seriously from the start. If Namek Saga Gohan had all this power in the Cell games, he would have got the job done from the start. For some reason, Cell Saga Gohan just seemed different. A hero must rise to the occasion. Gohan's failure to do so until it's too late makes his character arc feel more like a delay than a development. Gohan's transformation to Super Saiyan 2 is triggered by rage, exactly what he had been afraid of the entire time. But when he becomes Super Saiyan 2, he becomes cold, detached, even sadistic. Yes, that is interesting for the audience, but for Gohan the character, that doesn't do him any favors. He toys with Cell, refusing to finish him quickly, and in doing so, he inherits the very flaw that defined many of the villains before him: arrogance. Instead of showing wisdom beyond his years, Gohan indulges in revenge. This leads directly to Cell's near self-destruction, the death of his father, and the return of Cell. The twist turns what should have been a heroic triumph into a cautionary tale, and while that might work from a thematic standpoint, it feels like a misstep for a character whose entire journey was about growth, restraint, and responsibility. Gohan didn't defeat Cell because he was better. He defeated Cell despite nearly blowing the entire fight and needed everybody's help in the process. Gohan doesn't really grow from the experience, at least not in the way viewers had hoped. Instead of evolving into a confident protector of Earth, Gohan retreats inward after the fight. By the time we reach the Buu Saga, he's abandoned his training, and much of the potential built up over several arcs feels squandered. But the seeds of that disappointment are planted in the Cell games. Gohan is handed the victory, but it's a hollow one, tainted by overconfidence, collateral damage, and the death of his father. Unlike Goku or even Vegeta, who come out of battles changed and reflective, Gohan ends the Cell games unsure of himself. The torch is passed, but the fire never truly catches. Even Goku's death and the final Kamehameha struggle rely heavily on external support. Goku's spirit, Vegeta's distraction, and in the anime it's definitely a hurting blast against Cell, it buckles his knees, Piccolo's emotional investment, and everybody else using what energy they got left to distract Cell. Even Vegeta questioned this could actually work. Gohan is at the center of everything, but he rarely feels in control. He wins the battle, but not on his own terms, and definitely not on his own. That lack of agency makes him feel more like a plot device than a fully realized hero. From his explosive outbursts as a child to his training with Piccolo, to his untapped potential being hyped again and again, fans were led to believe that Gohan's moment would be something transformative, something that would redefine the power structure of the series. Instead, we got a fight, defined more by waiting than action, a transformation rooted in rage, and a victory that came at too high a cost. Gohan's rise to power lacked the confidence, conviction, and clarity that the story had promised. He may have saved the day with everyone else, but he did so in a way that felt less triumphant and more tragic. The most tangible consequence of Gohan's arrogance is the death of his own father. When Gohan gains the upper hand, he chooses not to finish Cell immediately. He wants to show off his newfound superiority. Despite multiple warnings from Goku, Piccolo, and others, he let his ego dictate his actions. A death that could have been easily avoided had Gohan simply finished the fight when he had the chance. Even after Cell returns as Super Perfect Cell, the final beam struggle only happens because Gohan let the situation spiral out of control. His broken arm, his initial self-doubt during the Kamehameha duel, all of it stems from the fact that he played with fire when he should have extinguished it. In a show where consequences often don't stick, Goku's death at the hands of his own son's hubris stands out as one of the most impactful. Instead of showing that Gohan is ready to take Goku's place, the fight suggests the opposite. He isn't emotionally ready to wield that kind of responsibility. The arrogance doesn't feel like growth, it feels like regression. The Cell Saga's overarching message revolves around growth, legacy, and trust in the next generation. Goku places his faith in Gohan not just because of his power, but because of his heart. Gohan is supposed to represent a different kind of warrior, one who doesn't love fighting, one who fights only when necessary, and one who could usher in a more peaceful era. But Gohan's arrogance in the final battle contradicts that hope. He doesn't end that fight quickly or mercifully, he doesn't outsmart Cell or outmaneuver him with calm wisdom, he begins winning by brute force. And even then, after the final beam struggle, the victory is only there after costly mistakes brought on by his own ego. The narrative tells us that Gohan is the future, but his actions suggest he's not ready to be the protector Earth needs. The lesson becomes muddled. Was Goku wrong to trust him? Was Gohan's power too much too soon? Instead of closure, the saga ends on uncertainty. His behavior doesn't just affect that arc, it ripples throughout the rest of the series. Many fans view Gohan as a wasted character in later arcs, and that disappointment begins here in the Cell games. It's the start of a decline. He doesn't emerge from the Cell games as a wiser, stronger leader. He emerges shaken, guilt-ridden, unsteady. What should have been a turning point becomes a temporary spike followed by years of inconsistency. That's why the memes are out there. Gohan peaked too soon. And that's absolutely true. And for a character built up with so much promise to the Cell games, that fall from grace is one of Dragon Ball Z's most disappointing and under-discussed tragedies.